April 5th. This is Dave, aka Serial Killer. It's my first go at a video, and hopefully it comes across as worth it, and everyone likes what they see, and maybe I can offer something. Maybe I can't. We'll tell by the feedback. Basically what I'm going to cover right now, this isn't going to be too big of a video right now. I'm going to cover the topic of resining the outside. Just a few things that I'd like to cover that I don't think have been covered in great detail. Maybe they seem like small little things, but I beg to differ. First and foremost, polyurethane resin. You can buy Rust Check brand, Bondo brand. There's a lot of different aquatic brands. Ultimately, polyester resin's polyester resin. With regards to it, the mix, number one. Now, this isn't like Bondo. Bondo is a lot more forgiving in the sense that you can really eyeball the hardener. Normally, like per ounce of Bondo, you just put a ring of hardener on it and you're good to go. It may take 5 minutes longer to cure up and set, but ultimately it'll get you to the same means. The cream hardener is just a trigger. With the resin, it's slightly different. It's different in the sense that if you add too little, you're going to end up with a tacky touch when you're done. There isn't much tack left on this piece. I did have some tack on it, but that's for a completely different reason, which I'll get into shortly. Yeah, follow the instructions with your resin. Like for instance, this resin, and I'm pretty sure it's spot on with the Bondo stuff. Let's see here. Per ounce, use 12 drops. Follow that rule. Using less, not advisable. Using more, it doesn't make it cure any faster. Well, that's not true. It will make it cure faster. It won't make it cure any harder or anything like that. What it's going to do is it's going to cut down your work time. So you should get about 10 minutes of work time on this if you follow the directions. For every drop per ounce you add extra, you can cut a minute off. Guaranteed. Alright, I had my little cheat sheet here because I didn't want to forget anything and then say, oh yeah, later, by the way. Okay, temperature ranges. There's I'd say three reasons why you would ever pep something out, go to the trouble of resining it, and then you'd have a tacky surface when you're done. The biggest culprit is temperature, and not in the sense you may think. Okay, temperature, the working temperature of this stuff, it says it'll work at, I don't know, what's the temperature in here right now? Right now it's 10, so close to 60 degrees in here right now. I've resined this whole thing. Minimum temperature for a resin is about 14 degrees. The best ideal temperature to use it at is above 20. The reason for that, and specific to when you're doing a resin coat on PEP, is because of the extreme thin coat that you end up using. See, fiberglass resin, you can use it in almost 0 degree temperature if you're using a thick enough application. Like if you were using it on the side of a boat or the side of a car, or you were building something up that had a density of like the thickness of your pinky finger, or even half that. What happens is when you add the hardening drops to the resin, it causes a chemical reaction. The byproduct is heat. All right. Now, heat also helps in the curing process. You ever noticed, like everyone does, they mix too much resin, and the stuff that's left over in the cup turns into a solid rock because it has its density, so it's not losing its thermal energy. But when you have a thin coat, like we do on these PEPs and this paper, I mean, it doesn't hold heat all that well. What happens is you get a tacky surface. So I've tried using heaters. I have a portable heater in here that I keep about a foot away from it for about 15-20 minutes after I first applied the coat. And I'll still get tacky spots. So yes, temperature is key, but simultaneously you could realistically be in 25 degree heat, 30 degree heat, and you'd still have tacky spots. And like I said, primarily it's due to the thin coat that gets put on, so it doesn't have enough thermal energy to cure itself properly. Now this isn't a problem. If you notice, hopefully you can, there is a visible color difference from the front of the chest piece to the top of the shoulder, where you can see it's very white here, and it is very yellow here. Now, what I basically take is baby powder. Baby powder because it's cheap, and my wife won't let me use the cornstarch, but this is cornstarch based baby powder. I would highly advise against using the old stuff, that's talc, because talc in your lungs, you may as well be resining and doing Bondo without a respirator on. It's just that bad. It's actually worse in my opinion. Because the talc will get into your lungs and it'll mix up with the moisture and it'll make like a concrete in there. But that's neither here nor there. I basically go over every piece with a brush and a cup with baby powder in it. You can use cornstarch and you just basically dust the whole thing. It's not really like a concrete science or anything like that. Anywhere where it's tacky, brush the baby powder on or the cornstarch on, and within a few hours you'll lose that tackiness. And once you combine it with the coat that you put on the inside, the structure will be rigid enough, absolutely, to withstand the rondoing or the glassing that you're going to do, and you won't really have to worry about warping. Okay, what's next on the structure here? Okay, application. One thing that I'd like to touch on, just because a lot of the different threads I see where people are doing builds, and I see a lot of pieces that are really coated with resin, and in my opinion you're just making a lot of work for yourself later. What I'll do is in a second I'll bring the camera closer just so I can give you a better idea of what I'm talking about. But the procedure I follow when I do it simply is just use some disposable brushes, obviously, because they're going to be trashed after you use one for one use. When I resin, I do it in blocks. Like there's no way I would resin this whole thing in one shot. It's not about time sensitive or anything like that. If you notice on the inside, I don't have any of the support structures. All I've basically done with this is I've put paint stir stick on the bottom just to hold it rigid. Everything else, I mean, there's no supports in there whatsoever. You know, I could try and be fancy and whatnot, but really it's laziness. That and basically the unfold in Pep Viewer for some reason got corrupted, and I didn't want to put all the scaling information back in again. I couldn't remember the exact numbers, so I figured putting the struts in at that point would maybe push or pull too much, but once again, neither here nor there. So, quadrants. Normally what I'll do is I'll break it up into 4 pieces. I'll do this first section here, and I'll do the opposite side on the back. So, front left, back right, because basically they're not affiliated with each other. And they're not going to stress the whole structure out because you're going to have a dry section here and a dry section on the back on the corresponding diagonal. So basically this diagonal and that diagonal do in one shot. Once that's cured after a few hours, then I'd move on and do this half and the corresponding 45-degree angle on the back. Now this has had one coat and it's pretty rigid. I mean, I could theoretically move straight to rondoing the inside because I plan on brushing it in segments, but chances are I will do another resin coat on the inside. Now, here's what I want to talk about, what I was originally talking about, where I see a lot of people where it seems that they want to make sure they get enough resin on, so they're just dolloping the stuff on like this, you know, and you see a lot of run marks, but basically the hardest thing to overcome when you do that is all the detail lines. All these lines get filled in where they're nice, crisp 90-degree lines. They get filled in and valleyed and arced with resin, and you end up trying to sand it out and dig it out, and you're creating hours of work for yourself. Basically what I do is I just saturate the area purposely, like you'll see it dripping down, and I'll move on. I'll move on and I'll use the drips to start painting this area here. Once I've moved on to a decent section, I'll go back. It'll have given all the resin time to settle, so you'll have pools of it all along the creases. Then I'll come back, I'll just scoop all that extra resin out, and I'll brush it on further, and moving down and moving onward. Okay. Another thing I wanted to touch on was how much. So waste. When you're pouring your resin into your cup, everyone is probably guilty of it. You end up having more left over than you used. realistically, to harden this with one coat, I used probably 2 ounces of resin. That's it. That's it. No more, no less. Every time you sit there, you're pouring it, you're going, oh, was that enough? Your brain's going, no, you need more, you need more. You don't. 1 ounce at a time. Anything more than that, you're either working on too big of an area in one shot, or you're just wasting it. And if you work on too big of an area, you're going to end up with a crooked piece. It's going to warp because of the heat and the extra weight. What they'll do is they attack all the different strands that are in the paper, and as it's being saturated, and the whole piece will warp whether you have support struts in it or not. You see it all the time with helmets. You see it all the time with chest pieces where you can see it's off center of it. So I mean, it's not a race. Take your time, and everything will work out great. I think I've pretty well covered everything. The next thing I'm going to be doing, that'll be video 2, is I'll be doing the Rondo coat on the inside of this. I haven't decided 100% yet if I'm going to do another resining coat on the inside, but if I do, it'll be part of the video. If I don't, then it'll just be the rondoing and the separation of the front and the rear half. And that's about it. Chances are I've left out about 2-3 dozen things that I wanted to talk about that aren't on my little cheat sheet here. As always, if there's any questions, any comments, any critiques, something I should have covered, something maybe that was redundant, everyone figured out, yeah, we get it, feel free, leave me a message, and I'll fix it up for the next time. That, and if anyone has any comments on anything that they would like to see, then also leave a comment on that, and I'll make sure to get that on the next video. But until then, this is Dave, aka Serial Killer on the 405th. Hope you enjoyed. First go. Thank you. See you around.